One day, as my father dipped his brush into the ink, I noticed something unusual. The king raised an eyebrow. Unusual? The crown prince continued. I saw the ink being absorbed by the brush bristles. Normally, water flows downward, but what I saw was the opposite. How could I not find that fascinating? He then added, That's when I started working on this pen. The king was impressed by the crown prince's intelligence. Many people have used brushes, but none have thought like you. Isn't this a perfect example of learning through observation? Said King Sejong. Thank you for your kind words, father. I have a request, the crown prince said. Go ahead, replied King Sejong. Eunuch, bring it here, the crown prince ordered. The eunuch stepped forward, carrying a mysterious box. Crown Prince Yi Hyang turned to his father and said, Please distribute these golden pens to the historians and court ministers. The king, intrigued, asked, All of these pens? The crown prince proposed that ministers and officials who needed to write quickly should use them, and that historians who tirelessly recorded everything could benefit from these pens. Everyone's eyes widened in surprise. No one had ever thought about empathizing with the historian's work before. The king then asked for opinions. I believe the crown prince's idea is excellent. What do you all think? Do the ministers agree with his suggestion? One minister responded, We believe the crown prince is right. For someone so young, he already thinks about the well-being of his officials. It's truly admirable. Finally, the king granted permission to distribute the golden pens to the historians and court officials. Throughout the session, King Sejong smiled with pride, and the ministers shared in his joy. Your Majesty, the crown prince has a deep and thoughtful mind, they said. The crown prince smiled in satisfaction. Not long after, the golden pen he created sparked a new trend in Joseon. In the third year of King Sejong's reign, the crown prince introduced the pen to the court, and the reaction was overwhelming. Officials and ministers fell in love with the invention, and soon everyone was talking about it. Have you tried the golden pen created by the crown prince? I have. It's truly remarkable. One reason for its immense popularity was that it made writing official documents much easier. In addition, Hyang designed a portable writing pad for generals, allowing them to write comfortably anywhere when issuing urgent commands. It became the perfect companion for the golden-tipped pen. King Sejong was delighted. He ordered the mass production of both items and distributed them to the generals alongside Hyang's golden pens. As a result, these innovations brought significant changes to the kingdom. In the capital, merchants were busy with their booming business. How much for this pen? A customer asked. 7 kilograms of rice. But for you, I'll lower it to 6.5, the merchant replied. The customer tried the golden pen before buying it and was amazed by its beauty and ease of use compared to a traditional brush. So, this is the golden tip pen everyone's talking about? The shopkeeper responded, Indeed! It's the pen endorsed by the king himself, with an exquisite plum blossom engraving. The man was impressed. The pen was truly elegant. Smiling, he added, It's also easy to carry around and very practical when I need to jot something down quickly. Gathering his newly purchased papers, he waved goodbye and walked away. The shopkeeper bowed, reminding him to be careful. As the customer disappeared from view, the shopkeeper couldn't shake the thought of golden-tipped pens, sensing the scent of profit in the air. A few days later, during a court session, a minister reported to the king. Recently, there has been an unpleasant incident in the market. An unpleasant incident? Tell me, King Sejong commanded. There are rumors that counterfeit golden pens are being sold everywhere, the minister explained. How dare they forge such a valuable item, especially one bearing the royal emblem? This is a serious crime and must be dealt with accordingly. The officials all agreed, urging the king to impose severe punishment. However, the king believed that the crown prince's opinion was crucial, given that he was the pen's creator. He immediately ordered an eunuch to summon the crown prince. Moments later, Hyang arrived. Father, you called for me? The king got straight to the point. The ministers have suggested that those who attempt to profit from counterfeit golden pens should be severely punished. I want to hear your thoughts, my son. Hyang furrowed his brows, deep in thought. All eyes were on him, waiting for the young prince's response, admiring his wisdom. After a few moments, Hyang spoke. Father, may I handle this matter? A month passed, and the crown prince began taking action. He arrived at the Ministry of Revenue, where everyone present immediately knelt, bowing deeply in respect. Hyang spoke calmly. Well then, do you know why I've summoned you here? He lifted a pen. One of the officials saw it and turned pale. No one dared to raise their heads. A representative from the Merchants Guild spoke hesitantly. None of us would dare to commit such a disgraceful act. Our guild would never betray the kingdom like that, another representative added, trembling. Hyang glanced at them and said, I didn't come here to accuse you. Stand up. Sweat dripped from their faces, their bodies trembling so violently that they couldn't bring themselves to rise. Hyang's voice turned sharp and commanding. Don't make me repeat myself. What are you doing? Stand up now. As the guild representatives regained their composure, Hyang took a seat and spoke with authority. I'll get straight to the point. I intend to grant production rights for golden-tipped pens and regular pens to one of your guilds. However, those producing golden-tipped pens would be taxed 20% of their profits, and the market price of the pens could not exceed 60% of the production cost. A hesitant official finally spoke up. Your Highness, I apologize for saying this, but he carefully explained that a 60% profit margin sounded excessive. But if you factor in the wages of sellers and craftsmen, we only make about 30% profit. If the court takes 20% of that, we'll be left with only 10%. Yang slammed his hand on the table, his face filled with fury. Are you trying to deceive me? The official instantly fell silent. Yang pointed directly at him and shouted, I specifically said 20% of the profits. Isn't 20% of 30% only about 6%? You fool, blinded by greed and deceit. Get out of my sight and revoke his guild's trading rights. The man's face turned to sheer horror. Stammering, he tried to protest. Your Highness! But two guards immediately dragged him away, ignoring his desperate pleas. Please, Your Highness, I beg you! Another official glanced at him in terror, and an oppressive silence filled the room. No one dared to speak. Yang then addressed the room once more. Very well. His Majesty the King and I believe that merchants and commoners are invaluable to Joseon. No one can accomplish everything alone. Everyone needs help in life. Suddenly, Yang's voice rose sharply. But if any of you dare to lie to me as he did, merchants will be regarded as nothing more than scum. Mark my words. Everyone bowed deeply and responded in unison. We will remember your words well, Your Highness. With that, the discussion regarding the Golden Pen production was settled without further opposition. After the meeting, Hyang called for Eunuch Zhou to speak with him privately. A slight smirk formed at the corner of his lips. You handled things very well, Eunuch Zhou, Hyang remarked. I wouldn't dare, Your Highness, but may I ask, why did you do this? The eunuch inquired. Hyang let out a quiet sigh. You know I'm still too young. I had no other choice. Eunuch Zhou nodded in understanding. That is true. Very well, Your Highness. With your permission, I shall take my leave and rest. As Hyang watched him go, he felt deeply satisfied. Everything had gone exactly as planned. A government official suddenly spoke up. Your Majesty, I, General Sung have something to say. His voice was firm as he continued. We cannot proceed with the Crown Prince's plan. With unwavering confidence, he addressed the king directly. This was the first time Hyang had faced such political intrigue since his reincarnation. Until now, he had always been met with endless praise and admiration, especially after the success of the Golden Pen, which had gradually filled the government's treasury. The national budget had never been as large as it was now, and the financial situation was steadily improving. King Sejong and his ministers had begun to recognize the positive impact of commerce. The king himself praised Hyang, saying, The Crown Prince has truly accomplished something remarkable. However, those who disapproved of him had started gathering in secret. A group of conspirators met in hushed discussions, expressing their concerns that the court was becoming too accommodating to merchants, potentially lowering its status to that of common traders. They believed the king and his ministers were being overly generous. One minister stroked his beard and said, The root of all this is the Crown Prince. We must act quickly and bring this to the king's attention before things spiral out of control. The group agreed. No matter how intelligent the Crown Prince was, he was still just a child. Allowing a child to make such important decisions was a grave mistake. However, before they could act, the great retired King Taejong passed away on May 10th, in the 4th year of King Sejong's reign. He died at the age of 56. With his passing, the conspirators had no choice but to postpone their plans. It seems we must wait for another opportunity, one of them remarked, and the others nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Hyang was consumed with work day and night. He buried himself in books imported from China, standing with his hands on his hips and an expression of confidence. He hoped they would help him overcome his challenges and serve as inspiration for his ideas. By using these books as references, no one would question where his ideas originated, but even as he strategized, a dark expression crossed his face. I need to learn how to lie, he muttered, so everything goes according to plan. During a formal presentation at the court, Hyang clearly and logically laid out his proposal. That is why I believe it would be much easier if these Hindu numerals, which the Westerners refer to as Arabic numerals, were used in our country. What do the ministers think of the Crown Prince's proposal? King Sejong asked. Minister of Taxation Kim Jong stepped forward. After careful consideration, I believe Hindu numerals are indeed highly effective for representing numbers. Minister of Personnel, Heo-jo, nodded in agreement. I concur with that assessment, he added. The king swiftly made his decision. With the approval of these two key ministries, all officials are permitted to use Hindu numerals starting next month. If the results prove favorable, we will implement them nationwide. We obey your majesty's command, the ministers responded in unison. As the next petition was read, King Sejong looked toward Hyang. I believe the crown prince should hear this, he said. Hyang looked puzzled. Yes, father. The king rubbed his temples, concern evident on his face. The Ming Empire has sent a letter. Emperor Yongle was very pleased with the golden pens we previously sent, and has now ordered us to send an additional 100,000 as tribute. Hyang knew that the royal treasury was not in good condition, and he quickly began thinking. Suddenly, an idea struck him. He turned to King Sejong and proposed, what if the government ran a business itself? Run a business? The court was stunned by the suggestion. How could that possibly work? The inspector general protested, but the king motioned for them to be calm and allowed the crown prince to explain. Yang carefully laid out his reasoning. Since the Ming emperor is requesting more pens, it's clear they are quite popular in the Ming dynasty. Given their vast territory and large population, the number of literate people in Ming is certainly much higher than in our own country. If we collaborate with the merchants' guilds to handle the production of golden-tipped pens, the number of pens we can sell will far exceed the amount required for tribute. The king and his ministers fell into deep thought, carefully weighing the proposal. Minister Kim Jong silently calculated the numbers in his head. If we go by these projections, we are certain to make a profit. Yang continued. We could also have merchants accompany the Ming Empire's diplomatic envoys. In return, the merchants would only need to cover their lodging expenses. The king and several ministers exchanged understanding glances and smiled. However, Minister Xung Wu growled in protest. No, we cannot follow the Crown Prince's plan. He elaborated on his concerns. The Crown Prince's proposal would undoubtedly bring wealth to the palace. But, as history has shown, when we accumulate great riches, people become consumed by luxury. This leads to tyranny, making it impossible to uphold the true path of a king. Suddenly, another voice cut in. I, the Minister of Rights, agree with the Inspector General. Minister Sung added, how can we allow lowly merchants to accompany a diplomatic mission to the emperor? It would disgrace the honor of the Joseon nation. He went on, it seems the Crown Prince does not yet fully understand matters of state and diplomacy. I believe it would be best for him to focus on his studies and learn to view the nation's affairs through the eyes of a true king. With respect, Haiyang turned to his father. May I respond, father? The king gave a nod, granting permission. Haiyang then looked straight at Sung Are you saying that if we become wealthy, people will fall into decadence, ultimately leading to tyranny, and that this is inevitable, based on past events? Sung began to answer, but before he could finish, Hyang interrupted. If we look at history, people have had to sweat and bleed to maintain their luxuries. Are you accusing me of exploiting the people's sweat and blood? Sung shot back. Haven't I already said that we are bringing in wealth from outside our borders? But Hyang was undeterred. Even if the results have been favorable so far, there is no guarantee that will always be the case. And when things turn bad, it's the people who will suffer the most. Standing his ground, he then asked, Are you only living for today, General Sung Sung furrowed his brows. What are you implying? Hyang didn't hesitate. How can you be so sure that the golden pen is just a one-time success? Merchants don't only sell golden pens after all. Sung frowned. Do any high-ranking officials even use these pens? At first, many may have bought them out of curiosity, Sung continued. But in the end, they can never compare to the elegance of a traditional brush. They will remain nothing more than trivial playthings. Minister of Taxation Kim Jeom interjected. General, you are mistaken. Do you know how many golden pens were sold in just 1 month? 400 within the government, and over 1,000 in total. Sung was stunned. In a single month? How could something so insignificant sell in such numbers? Hyang smiled faintly. I apologize. Perhaps it seems trivial because it was created by a mere child. Realizing his mistake, Sung quickly bowed. Forgive me, Your Highness, for my rudeness. Hyang raised his voice. That is why, for the prosperity of our people, our relationship with merchants is crucial. Hyang then called for a eunuch. Bring me the book from my study titled Geography of the World. Moments later, the book was placed in King Sejong's hands. This is one of the books I collected thanks to the envoys we sent to the Ming dynasty. It details the geography and regional products of Ming and its neighboring countries. It also records that both the Ming dynasty and the Dai Viet dynasty harvest more wheat than our Joseon kingdom. They have abundant food reserves. Hyang continued. Many of our impoverished people suffer from hunger because our harvests are scarce due to droughts and spring famines. That is why we must use the profits from these envoys to buy wheat and provide relief for our people. Once again, Sung voiced his strong objection. The true path of a king lies in honest poverty. Both the ruler and his people should find contentment in living humbly, take joy in acting with integrity, and build virtue. Hyang raised his voice. Are you saying we should be proud of poverty and find happiness in honest suffering? Do you truly believe the people wish to live in righteous destitution? The people are simply poor. They die of thirst in the summer, freeze to death in the winter, and starve in the spring. In such a dire situation, who would praise their ruler for his virtue? Hyang spoke with unwavering conviction. There is a saying, even a nobleman would climb walls if his child starves for 3 days. No parent can sit idly while their children go hungry. A king is the father of his people. His children are crying out in hunger. Shouldn't a father do something for them? Upon hearing these words, King Sejong involuntarily exclaimed with enthusiasm, My son, that was an excellent speech. The scribes looked around in confusion before hurriedly writing down his words. King Sejong cleared his throat, and the court officials who had opposed the crown prince's ideas fell into silence, their gazes fixed on the king. He took a moment to regain his composure. As Hyang observed him, the silence lingered, with everyone waiting in quiet anticipation. Then, the king finally spoke. Crown Prince, please continue, he commanded. Yes, father, Hyang replied. The ministers and nobles outside the palace can endure hunger because they understand why they must do so and how to withstand it. But the common people lack that knowledge. They do not know how to endure hunger. If we truly wish to teach them, we must first alleviate their suffering, at least a little. That is true, King Sejong declared, slamming his hand onto the table with a loud thud. The entire court watched in stunned silence. Inwardly, Hyang thought, my father is so fired up that he might explode. Let's wrap this session up quickly, he continued. Throughout history, the will of the people has always been the will of heaven. Even if we uphold virtue, what would the gods think of us if our people are still crying out in misery? Moreover, there is a saying, man proposes, but God disposes. After doing everything in our power, shouldn't it be up to the heavens to decide? Let's wait and see how the heavens respond. Yet, when droughts or plagues strike, ministers claim it is because the king has lost his virtue and demand that he cultivate virtue first. Isn't that contradictory? Hyang then spoke with purpose. I know that many of you have been officials since before this dynasty was established. So why didn't you accuse King Taejo of losing his virtue when he founded this dynasty, while still a subject of Goryeo? Or, my grandfather, King Taejong, was he not wise when he raised his sword against his own brothers? Or was my father not virtuous when he ascended the throne instead of my uncle, the eldest son? At this, the court erupted in panicked pleas. Your Highness, that is not what we meant. Your Majesty, we have never harbored such wicked thoughts. We beg your Majesty, please grant us mercy. The king spoke at last. The crown prince's words were somewhat harsh. I hope the ministers will forgive him. Be mindful of your words. Hyang quickly replied, I will remember that, father. The king then turned to the ministers. Listen carefully. I too believe that the welfare of the people is of utmost importance. Furthermore, our tribute to the Ming Empire will proceed as the crown prince has planned. The ministers bowed their heads in acknowledgement, obeying the king's decree. Crown prince, is there anything else you wish to add? Hyang promptly answered, I believe it would be better to pay the people with wheat for their labor, rather than simply giving them aid, father. The king was taken aback. Pay them with wheat, you say? Hyang elaborated. The primary cause of droughts is the lack of rainfall. The absence of proper irrigation systems and reservoirs is another critical factor. To prepare for future droughts, we must build reservoirs in every city and repair the existing ones. I believe we can mobilize the people to carry out this work and compensate them with food. By doing so, we can prevent future famine. Isn't this like killing two birds with one stone? What do you think, ministers? The king turned and asked. The ministers replied, We believe this is a good idea, your majesty. The king then ordered the crown prince to return to the palace. Hyang bowed respectfully and answered, Yes, father. Suddenly, the king remembered something and instructed Hyang to participate in court discussions after the ancestral ritual was completed. Thank you, father, for allowing this young and inexperienced son to take part in court affairs and discuss matters of state, Hyang responded before turning to leave. The king then stood up and formally ended the session for the day. Everyone was dismissed. Understood, your majesty, they all replied. However, before anyone could move, the king's voice deepened, turning serious. Perhaps I should also reconsider what you all truly think about this dynasty. Fear gripped the ministers as they hurriedly responded. Your majesty, we have never harbored any thoughts of disloyalty, not even once. Please have mercy on us. With a furious expression, the king shouted, Get back to work! Instantly, the ministers' voices filled the chamber, pleading for the king's forgiveness. As they left, hushed whispers spread among them. One wrong step, and blood could be spilled, one muttered. He carries not only the blood of King Taejong, but also the rulers before him. Prime Minister Sung interrupted. Enough of this nonsense. You all better watch your tongues. My only concern is the future of this nation. Is this truly the end of it all? He let out a long sigh, and others signaled him to be cautious. Do you not know that the mouth is the gateway to disaster? Remember someone? Sung sighed again. We've suffered a major setback today. We underestimated the crown prince simply because he is young. One minister frowned and asked, Then what should we do now? Sung replied, If there is no other option, we may have to submit our resignations. At these words, the ministers exchanged uneasy glances. Resign? One of them murmured. Sung continued. However, it is our duty to counsel the king if he strays from the right path. Even ancient texts say that a wise ruler must listen to the voices of the people. I will ensure that the king remains a wise ruler, he declared meaningfully. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the queen inquired about the morning court session. I heard the crown prince caused quite a stir, she said. The king, looking exhausted, recounted how the crown prince had done nothing wrong. In fact, he had spoken exceptionally well. It was I who caused the commotion. I couldn't control myself and ended up speaking as I did when I was still the crown prince, the king admitted. The queen burst into laughter, tears welling up in her eyes. What a shame I couldn't witness that side of you, she said. Embarrassed, the king muttered, Enough, my queen. I'm already mortified. Yet, a smile crept onto his face. The queen observed him closely and said, Your expression seems brighter than before. Have you noticed? The king looked puzzled. Really? He asked. The queen poured tea into his cup. Speak freely. Besides, there's no need for your majesty to fear the scribe's pens, is there? She said, taking a sip. The king nodded. You're right. My priority should be my own peace of mind. Wise words, your majesty. the queen praised. The king then continued, I also informed the crown prince that he would participate in state discussions after the ancestral rites. The queen looked slightly concerned. Is that all right? The crown prince is still quite young. The king gave a small smile. I was satisfied with his conduct this morning and how he handled the matter of the scribes. I think everything will be fine. The more I observe him, the more he resembles a man in his 40s, the king remarked. The queen couldn't help but laugh. Not long ago, Your Majesty worried that the crown prince's intelligence would create a rift between you. But now, you seem more at ease, she said. The king nodded without hesitation. That's true. I do feel at ease now. Back in the palace, the king dismissed the eunuchs and maids. Once alone, he let out a deep sigh of relief. Should I let them reveal themselves, or should I force them out? He pondered, his mind in turmoil. Should I let everything end peacefully, or should I allow blood to be spilled? He wrestled with his thoughts. Many officials from his father's reign were still in the court. He needed ministers who were loyal only to him. When King Sejong issued the order, the Ministry of Taxation began producing golden pens to be sent as tribute to Emperor Yongle. However, a serious problem arose during the preparations. What did you just say? They can't meet the production deadline? A court official responded, Forgive me, Your Majesty. But the Merchants Guild responsible for producing the golden pens has reported that they are unable to complete the required quota on time. Just as he had expected, the Crown Prince said, Given the current state of the workshop, it's impossible to produce the golden pens on schedule. He then turned to the king and asked, Father, I'd like to confirm something. May I summon a representative from the Merchants Guild? Sung immediately objected. That is unacceptable. How can we allow lowly merchants to step into a place where the affairs of the nation are decided? But the king calmly replied, Inspector General, are you saying this because you already know the answer? Sung hesitated. Your Majesty, The king continued, I appreciate your loyalty. But why do you refuse everything outright instead of proposing an alternative solution? Lowering his head, Sung apologized. I beg your forgiveness, Your Majesty. The king then gave the order to summon the merchant. Before long, a representative from the guild was brought in and knelt before the king. Your humble servant greets Your Majesty, the merchant said. The king nodded. I have called you here because the crown prince has some questions for you. Answer truthfully. Yes, Your Majesty, the merchant replied. The crown prince then spoke. I heard that your guild is unable to produce the golden pens on time. Why is that? The merchant explained. Golden pens are intricate works of art. We must be extremely careful in crafting each one. Even if we speed up the process, there are still limits to what we can do. The crown prince asked again, So, is it true that each pen is crafted entirely by a single artisan? That is correct, Your Majesty, the merchant confirmed. The crown prince paused for a moment before turning to his father. Father, I have a solution, but I need to speak with the artisans from the guild first. Once again, Sung protested. Your Majesty, first a lowly merchant, and now the crown prince wants to summon an artisan to this esteemed place? Please reconsider. But the king, losing patience, shouted, Silence! Why should I not call upon them when this concerns national affairs? Sung, still dissatisfied, tried to argue again. Your Majesty, I was only... The king cut him off sharply. If you continue to argue, I will begin to question your loyalty. The room fell into a heavy silence. No one dared to say another word. The king then gave the order to summon the artisans. When the artisans arrived, the crown prince greeted them. I have heard that each artisan is responsible for the entire process of crafting a golden pen. Is that true? The group knelt and responded, Yes, Your Majesty. The crown prince continued, I have a suggestion for you all. Instead of having one artisan complete an entire pen, why not divide the tasks? One person could shape the pen tip, another could refine it, and a third could engrave it. What do you think of this change? The artisans exchanged surprised glances before responding. That is possible, Your Majesty. We would need some time to adjust, but once we are accustomed to the new process, it should be faster than the way we currently work. The crown prince nodded in approval. This is called division of labor, he explained. When multiple people work together, they can produce a greater number of goods at a much faster rate. The king was impressed. That makes sense. We will wait for good news from you all. You may go. Once everyone had left, the king turned to Jinho and asked, Where did you come up with such a brilliant idea, Crown Prince? The Crown Prince paused for a moment before replying. When I visited the kitchen, I saw the assistants and helpers dividing their tasks according to the head chef's instructions. I remembered that and came up with this idea. The king burst into laughter. This child finds brilliance in things most people overlook. The Crown Prince is truly extraordinary. What do the ministers think? The officials all responded in unison. We agree, Your Majesty. The Crown Prince is very wise. However, Sungum objected, saying, I believe the Crown Prince is too focused on trivial matters. Your Majesty, he should be using his sharp mind to study the teachings of the sages. The king firmly replied, Why do you consider thinking and drawing meaning from things others ignore as something trivial? Are sages not also those who reflect on what is best for the nation and its people, then share their insights? Why are you so narrow-minded, Sungum? Sungum lowered his head and replied, I only wish for the best for the Crown Prince, Your Majesty. The king's expression darkened. Is this what the Crown Prince mentioned the other day? That you think I and my ancestors are unfit to rule? Is that why you dare to say such absurd things? Sung panicked and quickly clarified. I would never dare harbor such disloyal thoughts, Your Majesty. Please understand. The Crown Prince observed the situation, realizing that his father's true nature was surfacing again. Sungum's words had indeed been somewhat narrow-minded, but the king's response was unnecessarily harsh. It was common for a ruler to showcase a talented heir, but using power to suppress those who disagreed was unbefitting of a true sovereign. Later, the Crown Prince returned to the Eastern Palace, closed the door, and sat in tense contemplation. He murmured to himself, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come up with an example of division of labor in time. His thoughts deepened. Lately, Father has been summoning me more often. I only wanted to stand out a little, but it seems I've dug my own grave instead. I didn't even realize that the concept of division of labor didn't exist in this era. The Crown Prince continued his reflections. Even before Adam Smith formalized the idea of division of labor, the concept had naturally existed for a long time. However, the transformation of labor division into an industrial principle was the result of an agreement between absolute monarchy and mercantilist policies. He pondered the state of his kingdom. What about Joseon? Though nominally an absolute monarchy, from a historical perspective, it was actually a struggle between kings seeking to maintain absolute power and officials advocating for a republic-like system. Meanwhile, the people desired a semi-republican government, one where the king loved his people more than the bureaucrats, a ruler who safeguarded the people's interests and granted them real power. Success would not happen overnight. He needed to build step by step to strengthen his father's rule. The Crown Prince thought even further. His father also wanted his authority to extend to the farthest reaches of the kingdom. To achieve that, he needed wealth. Filling the national treasury would be his first step. Resolute in his decision, the Crown Prince left the Eastern Palace and headed toward the main hall. The king was surprised to see him. Why have you come here? He asked. The Crown Prince calmly replied, I have something to discuss. The room fell silent. The officials present were stunned, wondering what the Crown Prince was planning this time. This video ends here, but the story isn't over yet. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next part.